Yes, ladies and gentlemen, your eyes have not mistaken you. We are here at Castro's in Bedford, as I am every Friday. And who just happens to walk in, because I invited him, former and maybe future U.S. Senator Johnny Sununu. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great.
I dragged you off the campaign trail, and I said, what's your favorite cigar?
I'm not off the campaign trail. I'm on the campaign trail.
You're talking to voters at NH Journal. So I offered you a cigar. You said, no, you only smoke pot. I thought that was an interesting comment. I may have made that up. I can't remember exactly. Okay. I do have to ask, though, before we do anything, when you drink adult beverages, not that you ever do in excess, what is your drink?
I don't have a drink.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you a wine guy? Are you a beer guy?
Yeah, probably prefer red wine to white wine.
Okay,
yes.
That's a step in the right direction. Real men, drink whiskey, and really good men drink Irish whiskey.
I have a brother who works in the marketing industry for whiskey, and he works for Bullet and Blade and Bow.
Well, Bullet, I haven't had the other one, but Bullet's solid.
They're both good.
They're both good. Excellent. Good. So speaking of good, how's it going?
You're welcome, Peter.
Shameless. We only believe in shameless self-promotion.
Peter is the youngest of the five brothers.
Yes, and the least impressive. So
no, he's very impressive. Very impressive.
Yeah. I don't like doing this because you might hit me. I've just done. I mean, when I normally on Zoom, I can be a jerk and then no one can get to me. So
I'll just ignore you.
You know what? My wife has that down pat. So speaking of good, how's it going on the campaign trail?
It's good. Look, it's fun. I'm not a career politician. I haven't been doing this in 17 years plus. And so to be out there, talk to people about the issues, talk about ways to solve problems, economy, jobs, affordability. It's really been fun, and it's something I know I can do effectively. And the fact is, we need a really strong, tough, independent voice for New Hampshire, and that's exactly what I'm going to do.
So I'm going to pick up there. I want to do a little bit of rank punditry up front. This past week, we saw Abdul El-Sayed win in Michigan. Michigan is not Massachusetts. It's not California. It's a state that's in a lot of ways it's kind of blue, reddish, purplish like New Hampshire, and yet this very aggressive, very far left, government-run healthcare, very anti-Israel, doesn't think it has the right to exist. Well, does that impact the conversation that you're having, or is that just that's over in Michigan, or do you see a trend that we should be aware of in New Hampshire with voters?
Well, it's a trend in the country, and it's more than a trend. And he's not a progressive; he is a socialist. I mean, there's a very specific agenda here. They're winning all the primaries.
Right.
They're obviously influencing the leadership. Even the presidential candidates, right? Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, this week came out supporting big pieces of the socialist agenda. Right. So they've got socialist candidates in Maine now, in Michigan, in the New York congressional districts. They're going to elect a socialist candidate for governor in Wisconsin. The socialists are in charge right now of the Democratic Party. They're driving it. And that's one of the reasons this is an important election, because look, Chris Pappas has gone along with them hook, line, and sinker. Certainly he's voted with his leadership down the line. When Nancy Pelosi was speaker, he voted with her 222 out of 223 votes, which is not New Hampshire. But a few weeks ago, he had an opportunity to sign a letter rejecting the socialist agenda.
Right.
And he refused. More than a dozen members of Democrat members of Congress signed. He refused. Now, it may be...
And interrupt, to give credit, Maggie Goodlander, local here in New Hampshire, she signed the letter.
She was one who
signed.
And
no one would consider her some right-wing Democrat. Like, she's not in the Fetterman
It could be that he's afraid.
Right.
It could be that he's just too weak, or it could be that he's going along with them. He certainly votes as if he supports the agenda. And again, just a week or two ago, good example, he voted against military funding for the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, a really important facility here in New Hampshire, thousands of New Hampshire workers at the shipyard. He voted against that funding. I mean, he's obviously voted to defund immigration law enforcement, another piece of the socialist agenda. And look, it goes further than that. They want to defund local law enforcement. They support open borders, want to make Puerto Rico and DC a state. These are very specific agenda points, and they're the very points of the socialist agenda that Chris Pappas refused to reject.
So when you were in the Senate, if someone had said, we're going to kill the filibuster, what would have been the reaction from both sides of the aisle?
There was just no support for it. I
Right.
mean, you know, people would talk about it
Right.
once in a while, but look, what's important to realize is the Senate is designed specifically to protect
Right.
the rights of individual states. And that's why it was designed. It was designed to protect the interests of states like New Hampshire,
Right.
smaller states, from being overrun, so to speak, by the big, more populous
Right.
states. So anything you do to undermine the power and the strength of individual senators is a blow against states like New
I
Hampshire.
want to pick up on it because there's another issue too, which is the Electoral College. There's a push, even Kamala Harris said we've got to look at the Electoral College. And there are people who say, there's no way a small state senator is going to support that. But that's not, on the left, there are small state senators supporting it. Why is that important for a state like New Hampshire?
Well, because we are a United States,
Mhm.
right? The president is elected by the states.
Right.
By the states coming together with a system, and the Electoral College system, that sort of balances the influence and the right and the voice of different states so that you don't have a regionally focused presidential candidate
Right.
that just racks up the votes in, say, a state like California or in the Southwest or even in the Southeast, and but doesn't have the support of a majority of
Right.
states or a distribution of states around the country. So, you know, to fight against the Electoral College is to fundamentally misunderstand how our government is structured and what the intention of
So
that.
thus far, Chris Pappas has been very, I'm not ready to abandon the filibuster. I'm not ready to the Electoral College. But the question that I've heard people is, if there's a majority and they need his vote, is Chris Pappas the kind of guy who's going to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to be the 51st vote to change the rules and do that?
Look, Chris Pappas hasn't stood up for anything, so why would he stand up for that? I mean,
Okay.
right? I mean, he didn't stand up for the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard.
Mhm.
He hasn't stood up to protect girls' sports from men and
Right.
boys competing against girls. He's failed to really stand up to support voter ID. He's failed to stand up and support immigration law enforcement. He just hasn't stood up for New Hampshire.
Okay.
Too weak, too ineffective. And I'll give one very specific example, although those are pretty specific. He's been on the Transportation
Right.
Committee for 8 years.
Mhm.
New Hampshire ranks dead last in New England in highway funding
Right.
from the federal government, right? Again, I don't know if he's not interested, if
Sure.
he's too weak to have an impact,
Right.
if he just has no influence with his colleagues, but he's totally ineffective for the state of New Hampshire.
So, what's interesting is New Hampshire it is so efficient. Its return on investment is so good that it actually does less with more. The numbers between Massachusetts and here per state road mile is just a phenomenal. They spend literally 5 times more than New Hampshire, and their roads are not as good. It's astonishing.
New Hampshire government across the board is more or less, pound for pound, more efficient than any other
Sure.
government in the country. We have the lowest state and local taxes of any state in the country. But we also have the lowest poverty rate and the lowest crime rate
Right.
of any state in the country. And again, that's just a credit to our local
Right.
governments, our willingness to put power and money in the hand of local leaders, and the fact that, we don't spend frivolously.
Sure.
So the folks in Concord need to know they need to get it done efficiently. And look, those are the values I grew up with. They're the ones I'll take with me to Washington.
So the other day in Massachusetts, your name was being taken in vain by Representative Pappas over the issue of Social Security. He was decrying the fact that back at the turn of the century, you were talking about a partial privatization or adding a privatization at a certain point in the process. He was there with a group that supports taking the cap off so your wages get taxed unlimited for Social Security, and
Sure.
they support a broad-based tax. Because look, fundamentally, they're right. There's a crisis. I mean, there's just, you either have to pay out less money over the next 50 years, or you have to take in more money in the next 50 years. So what's your response when they say you want to privatize Social Security and hurt people and their benefits today?
In short, him pulling something up from over 20 years ago to scare seniors is the worst kind of politics there is. I said when I made my announcement we're not going to cut or reduce anyone's benefit. We're going to keep every single one of our promises to every single one of our retirees. We do need some kind of a bipartisan approach and solution to extend the life of the Social Security Trust Fund. And I've always been willing to sit down. I have a reputation, not just of sitting down with people to solve problems, but actually writing legislation, getting it passed to solve different kinds of problems. Let's be clear what you pointed out, though, about Congressman Pappas. He is supporting tax increases, Social Security tax increases across the board. And
well, I got to interrupt because he didn't say he was supporting anything. He also didn't say he wasn't.
He's aligning himself with a group.
There's a great line from down south. I ran campaigns. Politicians stand up in the middle of a debate over contentious ideas. He'd say, some of the people are for it, some of the people are against it. I'm with the people. And that's Chris Pappas.
Look, it just comes back to the issue of, one, we need a bipartisan solution. Two, we protect all of our commitments and guarantees to retirees. And that can be done. That can be done. Look, I worked on the last balanced budget that we had, right? We controlled spending, we cut taxes, and by controlling spending over time, keeping the economy strong, we balanced the budget. So we can tackle these tough problems, but it's best to do it. It's always best to do it without the kind of rhetoric from Chris Pappas, which is geared to scaring the vulnerable, scaring the elderly, and it's certainly not New Hampshire, but I don't think it's the right way to approach politics.
Just promising, everyone's just gonna get everything. In fact, he even said he wanted to give more money to some seniors, even as the program's running out in 2032, and he didn't feel the need to answer the question, where does money come from? So I'm gonna put you on the spot. I mean, would you be willing to consider things like, for example, adjusting the retirement age to make it possible for people in the future?
Michael, this is a political game,
right?
That the left wants to play. Okay, no one is going to be able to pass a partisan Social Security bill.
Right.
Okay? So it doesn't make any sense to start listing choices and options. I'm going to do this, but I won't do this. I'll do this, or I won't do this. Now, if you're just playing politics, if it's just a game, which, that's kind of the way Chris Pappas is approaching it, that's fine. But that's not the way to solve the problem. If you want people who are really going to solve a problem, look for people who have taken tough stands in the past, who have fought for New Hampshire, fought on issues important in New Hampshire, and won. And I've done that my entire career.
So it's a different era for Republican politics. There are a lot of people in this kind of populist J.D. Vance wing who look at corporations and they don't like what they see. And they look at your work in business since leaving the U.S. Senate and they go, he was on the wrong team. He wasn't on our team. He was on, quote, evil big business team. What do you say when you hear that criticism?
Well, look, I worked in the private sector, not just for larger companies, worked for a lot of smaller companies, worked for nonprofits, and we can talk about some of the specifics. But look, I'm not going to criticize J.D. Vance, but the fact of the matter is we need a strong, competitive economy, a strong free enterprise system that creates jobs, drives wages higher, creates competition to keep the cost of living down, right? That's how our economy functions. And I don't like the idea of the government taking ownership of companies. I don't like the idea of the government providing grocery stores in New York City or anywhere else. That will end in tears. There's no question.
You don't want to shop at the DMV grocery store. It'll be fantastic.
And the federal government shouldn't be taking ownership stakes in computer chip companies, right? That's not good economics. It doesn't have a good track record historically. And that's the kind of thing that I would fight against. Now, look, private sector experience hiring and training employees, experience dealing with healthcare, dealing with regulations, just making good decisions about investing capital to build new factories or buy new equipment. That's extremely valuable. It's not just valuable, it's important to have that perspective in government generally, and I think in Washington. I mean, I've worked for startup tech firms. I still serve on the board of the Waterville Valley Ski Area, which is a great iconic resort here in New Hampshire. We've made great investments in expanding that area, creating new jobs at Waterville. one of the larger companies I work for, Boston Scientific, is a manufacturer of medical devices, stents, pacemakers, defibrillators. During the time that I served on their board, we probably created 15 or 20,000 new jobs in America.
Right.
That, and all the while having a huge impact on millions of patients' lives and saving lives. So look, as an engineer, I love the innovation of a company like that, development of new products, less invasive, safer, and that minimize the risk to the patient. So look, the private sector is what makes our economy strong, and it's what creates great job opportunities for Americans across the board. And I think we need more of that experience in government rather than less.
People, particularly younger people, just don't fundamentally agree. They say some companies make too much money and some people have too much wealth. So what is your answer to this criticism that the system that you are defending, whatever its merits on paper, end up with a country that's just not fair?
Look, I appreciate the fact that you seem to have adopted the socialist doctrine.
I'm here fighting for that. Das Austria Revolutia, absolutely.
The only problem with that point of view is it's been proven wrong every decade of the last 120 years. Okay, government ownership of the means of production is a terrible idea. You should have a tax system that's fair and that's equitable. Make corporations pay their fair share. Absolutely. Make individuals. The top tax rate for individuals is 40%. And obviously for lower income people, it's a much lower rate and very significant tax deductions as we should have. Right. But while wealth tax, right, taking 5% of what someone owns has never worked, and it's simply confiscation. It's going to someone saying.
There's a reason why in California, even though the governor, Gavin Newsom, who's hardly a right winger, has said don't do it, it's moving forward on the ballot because there's a group of people who really are frustrated. My question to you isn't why they're
California,
but my question is, what is your message to those, say, 30-something-year-olds who say, I just feel like the system's ripping me off. And I feel like if you're defending the current system, you're not helping me. What's your message to those frustrated people?
Look, we can do more to give them opportunity, to create opportunity, good paying jobs, deal with affordability, right? Take healthcare affordability. Why is healthcare so expensive? We've invested more in healthcare over the past 10 years, but premiums didn't go down like they promised.
Sure.
You weren't able to keep your doctor. Okay. Congress messed it up. Right? We need more competition. Let health insurance companies compete across state lines. We need health savings accounts. We need price transparency. Make a hospital, an outpatient clinic, a doctor, tell us what things really cost. And deal with the regulations. Ask any nurse or doctor how much time they spend on regulations. Look, you say sure,
right?
But this is what that 25-year-old needs to understand before they sign up for government taking over the entire healthcare system from soup to nuts, because the government hasn't done a great job with some of the responsibilities it already has.
So what's fascinating to me is Stephanie Shaheen, who's running for Congress, was I'm not saying I support single payer. And she's now evolved to, of course, I'm open to single payer. And that's a sign of where people are going.
Well, that's a sign of where she's going because she is being confronted by
the base of her party,
by the socialist base of her party. Absolutely. No, they're just buckling. The population in New Hampshire is not for a government takeover of the healthcare system.
They're not. So if Chris Pappas came out tomorrow and said, I support single payer, I support Medicare for all, you think that's a mistake?
Absolutely.
Why? Why, for the people who are watching, why is that a mistake?
Because I think most people in New Hampshire understand that government really doesn't do anything well. Okay? Government doesn't do anything well. And there are some things we need government to do. Very important things, right? To help the most needy, national defense, law enforcement, public safety, et cetera. But that doesn't mean that government is efficient at it.
Right.
And so when it comes to healthcare, a full government takeover of the healthcare system, you're going to get what they have in the United Kingdom or even Canada. Tremendous waiting lines, less innovation, less quality.
Did you see the report from Canada? their wait time in the emergency room. This isn't like I called ahead and I need surgery. This is, I showed up 48 hours.
Well,
People are staying in gurneys and hallways
Right.
for 2 days in an emergency room.
so
because
so
of
you've made my
capacity.
point, and maybe you should have led with that.
I want you to explain. Look, I don't, it doesn't matter what I think. I just know the voters are more and more open to things on the left, and you're going to be confronted with this by Chris Pappas. And so
I think you're wrong about that. I don't think
the polls aren't.
What the evidence has shown is that some of the Democrat primary electorate
okay.
is open to it. Okay, they've elected socialists in Maine.
Right.
They've elected socialists in Michigan. But I don't think it's going to end very well for them in those places, and I think it may end very poorly for them in other places.
Well, one place that I know a bunch of Republicans support more government is big tech, and they want government to step in, whether it's affecting what's on the internet or whether it's controls on who can access it based on age, et cetera. They think big tech companies are dangerous. They manipulate elections, et cetera. Should the federal government be doing more to oversee big tech and social media?
Sure. Well, look, on AI in particular, I think there's a need to provide some guardrails and protections for children and minors.
Right.
So from abuse and harm, and from seniors, from fraud, for example. So AI is a really powerful tool. And so making sure that, we have updated our laws to provide protections like that, absolutely the right thing to do.
What about data centers? There's a big push to say no more data centers. Some Republicans are saying no more data centers.
Any investment, whether a new energy plant,
Right.
a new pipeline, a data center, even a new manufacturing plant, needs to survive on its own merits. Right? Does it make sense economically? Does it have a rate of return? Is there resources, power, water to support it? And the data center is no different. In New Hampshire, our electric rates are still pretty high. So there aren't a lot of people scrambling to build large, electricity consuming data centers here. But that doesn't mean you should just ban data centers nationwide when they have the ability, and we already have them obviously to support broadband, to support data for corporations.
I'm a big dummy, but if I was a politician in New Hampshire and some company said, we're going to go to the north of the state where you guys are hurting for jobs, we're going to have our own power source, whether it's geothermal, whatever, so we're going to power ourselves, any excess power we'll make it available to the grid, and we're going to have this massive data center. I think that was great. And that's the old days of people liking development and growth. And
captive energy is becoming more and more part of the solution when someone goes in and wants to build, obviously, a data center, but other factories as well. I mean, cogen was obviously a big thing in the late 90s, early 2000s, and in a way, this is just son of cogen, where they're those that are going to consume the power, are willing to step up in some cases and make the power investment.
So the Chris Pappas campaign against Johnny Sununu, our guest, thank you very much, is one sentence. Johnny Sununu is going to go to Washington and help Donald Trump. New Hampshire can't afford it. What's wrong with that pitch?
Whose pitch is that?
That's Chris Pappas's.
No, look, this isn't about Donald Trump. It's about New Hampshire. It's about the next 6 years. It's about having someone who'll stand up in Washington every single day and fight for the people of the state of New Hampshire. That's what I'm committed to doing. It's what I've always done. And I've been willing to take stands regardless of who's on either side. Look at the fight we had on the Patriot Act. Adding civil liberties and constitutional protections under the Patriot Act. I led 4 or 5 other Republicans. We worked with all of the Democrats just about on the Senate side. Stopped a Republican-led bill, a bill supported by a Republican president, and made changes. And because it was the right thing to do. And history has shown we were right. The abuses we were concerned about happened, both Republican and Democrat presidents. Absolutely. Right? So to be willing to take a stand like that, to be willing to make a difference, regardless of the leadership, I think is a hallmark of my time in government. I'm not a career politician. Look, I don't have any interest in running for any other office. I don't need an appointment. I don't need to make anyone in Washington happy. I just need to focus on standing up for the people in New Hampshire every single day And that's what I'm going to do.
So someone asked me to say something nice about you, and it took me a while, but I said the last time that New Hampshire had a member in the federal delegation who mattered beyond the borders of New Hampshire was when you were a U.S. Senator. And what made me think about that is Lindsey Graham, my former U.S. Senator, South Carolina, an acquaintance of mine. And you saw that funeral. My wife, who's not a politics person, she says, why is one? I mean, there's like 100 of them, right? Why? And I said, well, because he mattered. And then you look at our delegation and fine people, nice people, whatever. When was the last time they mattered? And the example that sprang to mind, of course, is the first in the nation primary, where it simply didn't matter. These members of federal delegation, they could not apply any pressure to protect New Hampshire. Is that a fair criticism of our current delegation?
Well, it is. I mean, obviously, if the delegation was stronger, if they were more effective, if Chris Pappas had any impact, we wouldn't have lost the first in the nation primary. And it's important for people to understand the first in the nation primary. It's not about a simple political tradition. It's not about money. It's about the fact that New Hampshire is the best laboratory for lesser known candidates without a big bankroll, be able to come, campaign, town to town, person to person, build recognition, advance a platform in front of an electorate in New Hampshire that participates more than any other voter group in the country. So they're engaged, they're sharp, and it's an important part of the democratic process. And that's what we lost when the Democrats failed to secure that first in the nation.
There is no other state with as few people tucked away in a relatively obscure corner of the country that has as much heft and gravitas in the political system and in the minds of the political players as New Hampshire. I mean, as soon as you say, if you're a 2028 person, I'm going to New Hampshire, before you finish Shire, they're saying, when are you running? When are you going to announce?
Sure.
Will any 2028, no one's running, obviously, technically, but the names, you've got Vice President Vance, Secretary Rubio, so will any of them be campaigning for you before November?
I doubt it. I don't need anyone to come in and campaign for me. This is about New Hampshire. This is about what the voters in New Hampshire think, what they need, what kind of an advocate we're going to have in Washington. And my focus is just on talking about the issues, bringing down the cost of living, driving wages higher, supporting the New Hampshire economy, and obviously standing up for the state every single day. There was one person I asked to come into the state, and that's John Kennedy, because he is hilarious. He's a lovely guy. I mean, he's sharp. Even when he's disagreeing with you, you're kind of interested to hear what he has to say. And so he came in and did a picnic, and we had a great time. But
by the way, I talked to him and I said, "So you've served with Senator Brown, and Senator Sununu. Why are you picking with everyone?" He says, "I like Scott. Not his time." And that's a classic Kennedy, Louisiana approach.
John's a good guy. Hopefully,
is Scott Brown a good guy?
Sure. But John is the kind of person that connects with voters, connects with people, not just in New Hampshire, but all over the country. And he's fun to be around.
So let's wrap up with one last political thing. And the premise. The premise is very simple. It's a midterm. Trump's wildly unpopular. It's the kind of year where they're struggling to keep Republicans above water. In Texas, no federal candidates in New England are going to be winning any elections in 2026. Well, that's the conventional wisdom. Why is it wrong?
Well, Susan Collins going to win. I
said Republicans. Little joke there, huh? I'm just kidding. But other than Susan Collins, who's in real danger,
because this is an election about leadership in New Hampshire.
It's about 2026. It's about Donald Trump. That's what this election's about. That's all the voters are focused on, isn't it?
No, it's not, Michael. Okay. It's about the next 6 years. Number one. Right. It's about the kind of voice and leadership that New Hampshire is going to have in Washington. Someone who doesn't just go along with a crowd like Chris Pappas, 222 out of 223 votes with Nancy Pelosi. That's unbelievable and unacceptable. Okay. But it's also it's about the future. What comes after President Trump? He'll leave office in 2 years. That's obviously going to leave quite a void, right? Who are the people? What are the priorities? What's the tone? What's the temperament? And that's really what the election is about. It's also, look, this election is going to be about change. Okay. Not in a rejection of Congress, not rejection of Republicans or Democrats, but a rejection of the way Congress has been acting and behaving. The Democrats obsessed with Donald Trump,
Right.
the Republicans unable to get things done.
Mhm.
And Chris Pappas has been right there in the middle, the problem.
Mhm.
8 years, hasn't achieved anything, weak, ineffective, and there's no reason we shouldn't have someone, as I will, who can actually get the job done, provide leadership, and stand up for the state.
Last question, though, conventionalism types. What's something that you know or have experienced, maybe an event on the campaign trail, maybe a conversation you've had that you went, if these, pundits in Washington knew this, saw this, heard this, they would understand that this is a real race.
Well, it is a real race. I don't care what anyone in Washington thinks. You've seen all the polls. They're all dead even. They're in the
The Michigan polling was so accurate.
no, but it's a competitive, it's a toss-up race, Michael.
Okay.
You know that, right? It is a toss-up race. I don't want anyone from Washington focusing on this race
Got it.
because it's about New Hampshire, because it's about doing the right thing for the people of New Hampshire, the issues they're focused on, not the issues anyone in Washington is focused on. And look, for me, what's been emblematic or an emblematic moment on the campaign trail is talking to a group of voters in Kentucky, and someone asked me about constituent service,
Right.
because I've always talked about providing the state of New Hampshire with the best constituent service of any member of Congress anywhere in the country. And someone raised their hand and asked, well, can you give me an example of how you help someone with constituent service and the impact it had on them? And I was about to tell a story about helping a veteran get his medals back when someone threw up their hand and said, I'll answer that. And it was someone I had never met.
Right.
And he proceeded to tell a story about his company being shut off from an important product that they were importing from Canada after 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And he mentioned it to a friend, and they said, well, reach out to John Sununu's office. He says, well, I don't know John Sununu. And they said, no, just reach out to his office. And, this is what he does. And 2 weeks later, we had solved the problem. His company was back online importing the product. Had never met him, didn't know him, and he was there ready to sort of stand up and vouch for the fact that no one has ever provided constituent service as I have, and I'm going to do it again. I mean, it's the most important thing, really.
Right.
If you're a member of Congress, if you're a member of the United States Senate, you've got to provide, whether people voted for you or not, it's irrelevant. You've got to serve your state, and I love doing it.
Well, thank you for joining us here at Castro's in Bedford, one of my favorite places in New Hampshire. Hope you'll see you again. Thank you so much, Senator Sununu.
Great to be with you.